My name is Isabella, and for years I built my life upon a foundation of sand, believing it to be solid rock. The cornerstone of this fragile construct was my husband, Ethan Reed. He was the kind of man who drew eyes in a room, charismatic, successful, with a smile that could disarm you and a confidence that felt like a promise. We were college sweethearts, and I, an only child from a quiet town, had forsaken my own plans to build a life with him in his bustling city. It was a sacrifice I made willingly, fueled by love. But our marriage housed a ghost, a specter who breathed our air, shared our jokes, and slowly, insidiously eroded my happiness. Her name was Chloe. She was Ethan's female bro, a title that always felt like a shield for something more nebulous and threatening. They had grown up together in the same tight-knit neighborhood, a pack of boys and one girl who had forged a bond they described as unbreakable. The first time I truly understood the depth of their connection was a night Ethan stayed out until dawn. He stumbled in as the sun was painting the sky, carrying a box of pastries from my favorite bakery. I had been sitting at the kitchen island, the cold coffee in my mug a testament to the hours I'd waited. "Isabella, you're up," he said, his voice too bright, too casual. He set the box down. It was Chloe's birthday celebration. Things got late. We had a bit too much to drink, so we just crashed at a gaming hotel. My silence was a heavy, accusatory thing. He shifted uncomfortably. "But we didn't share a bed," he added, a note of defensiveness creeping in. I slept on the floor. "I know we fought about that last time." We had. It had been a screaming match that left our apartment feeling hollow for days. I had accused him of being a married man with no sense of boundaries. He had, in turn, accused me of being paranoid, of not trusting him. "Chloe is just one of the guys," he'd explained then, his patience wearing thin. "She's like a sister to me. Her personality is just carefree. She treats everyone like a buddy." I'd seen this carefree personality in action. I'd seen her perch on the arm of his chair, her body angled towards his. I'd seen her take a sip from his glass without asking, her eyes meeting mine over the rim as she did so. I'd seen the way she laughed at his jokes, a hand resting on his arm for a beat too long. That morning after the gaming hotel, his explanation felt rehearsed. "If something were to happen, it would have happened already, Bella," he said, using the soft, coaxing tone he reserved for when he was trying to placate me. "You wouldn't even have married me." The words were meant to be reassuring, but they felt like a dismissal. They invalidated my feelings, my discomfort. It was as if my perception of a line being crossed was a personal failing, a lack of trust on my part, rather than a valid reaction to their behavior. His friends, a chorus that always echoed his sentiments, would chime in. "Isabella, you have to understand, Chloe's been with us since we were in diapers. Ethan sees her as a kid." The woman was 25 years old. The absurdity of it was a bitter pill I was forced to swallow. The breaking point for me at that time had been a public gathering. We were at a rooftop bar with his entire childhood crew. Chloe, as always, was the sun around which they all orbited. At one point she plopped herself directly onto Ethan's lap, looping an arm around his neck as she told a rambling story. The casual intimacy of it, the sheer ownership in her gesture, sent a hot wave of humiliation through me. Ethan didn't push her away. He just laughed, his arms resting comfortably at his sides. I stood up and walked away. The fight that followed was nuclear. "You embarrassed me in front of all my friends," Ethan had roared, his face flushed with anger and shame. "I embarrassed you? She was sitting on your lap, Ethan. Your lap. As if I wasn't even there. It's just Chloe. She doesn't mean anything by it. Why do you have to sexualize everything? This isn't about sex, Ethan. This is about respect. Basic human marital respect." It ended with him slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. He didn't come home that night. I later found out he'd gone to Chloe's. In the aftermath, for a brief, hopeful period, Ethan did try. He kept his distance from Chloe. He came straight home from work. He was attentive, present. I allowed myself to believe that the storm had passed, that he finally understood. But Chloe wasn't one to be ignored. She began a campaign of subtle, vicious sabotage. At group dinners, she'd pat the empty seat next to her and say, in a voice dripping with false concern, "Oh, Ethan, you better not sit here. Isabella might get upset." Or she'd pout during plans for a second location. "Ethan, you probably shouldn't come with us. We wouldn't want to cause any trouble at home." She performed this act of cautious deference perfectly, always ensuring I was within earshot. The narrative began to shift. I was no longer the wronged wife. I was the jealous, petty, and unreasonable woman who had leashed her husband. I was the outsider who didn't understand their sacred bond. Ethan, caught in the middle, grew distant. The man I loved became a sullen stranger in our own home. Our conversations were polite, functional, and utterly devoid of warmth. The foundation was cracking, and I was the only one who seemed to notice the chasm opening at our feet. The present day found me in that same kitchen. Ethan had once again stayed out all night with Chloe. He came in at noon bearing food like a peace offering. I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just a vast, echoing emptiness. I watched him move around the kitchen, this handsome, successful man who belonged to everyone but me. He noticed my detachment. "Sweetheart," he said, walking over and enveloping me in a hug. I stood stiffly in his arms. "I'm sorry about last night. Didn't you want to watch that new sci-fi movie? I'm clearing my schedule today. Go. Just you and me." The movie. I had begged him to see it with me when it premiered. He'd claimed a critical work deadline. 2 days later, Chloe had posted a picture on her social media. 2 ticket stubs and a man's hand resting on a steering wheel. The hand had distinct knuckles and a simple platinum wedding band. It was unmistakably Ethan's. As he hugged me now, I caught the faint, sweet scent of pear blossom on his shirt. Her perfume. I pulled away, my movements calm and deliberate. "No need," I said, my voice flat. "I'm not interested anymore. Isabella." His voice held a warning, a flicker of the old impatience. He grabbed my wrist, his grip firm. "Are we really doing this again? The silent treatment? I've told you nothing happened between me and Chloe." I looked him dead in the eye, my gaze steady. "I know," I said, my tone chillingly serene. "You two are just siblings." The words hung in the air, so familiar yet so foreign coming from my mouth. He was taken aback, his brow furrowing in confusion. He had expected a fight. He was prepared for tears and accusations. This calm acceptance was a language he didn't understand. "Then what's your problem now?" he asked, his frustration evident. "I'm going on a business trip," I stated, turning to leave. "My flight is in a few hours." Ethan's face darkened. He stared at me, his eyes searching mine for a trace of the old hurt, the old jealousy. He found nothing. Because there was nothing left. The well was dry. "Who you watch movies with, who you stay out all night with, it doesn't matter to me anymore, Ethan," I said, and I meant it. I left him standing there, a confused king in a castle I had already decided to abandon. The first grain of sand had shifted and the entire structure was beginning to tremble. I was done trying to hold it up. Seeing my indifference, Ethan didn't find peace. He found a new kind of fury. My calmness was an affront to him. He was so used to my passionate anger, my tears, my desperate attempts to reclaim him, that this serene detachment felt like a deeper, more profound rejection. He became convinced I was merely sulking, playing a more sophisticated game, and he was determined to win it. He fumbled with his phone, his thumbs stabbing at the screen. "Fine. We'll go to the movies. Right now. I'll get the tickets." He was like a warrior trying to fight a ghost, his weapons useless against my emptiness. I watched his frantic search for a moment, a strange pity stirring in my chest. Finally I spoke, my voice soft but clear. "Ethan, that movie has already been taken down. It's not in theaters anymore." His finger froze mid-tap. A kaleidoscope of emotions flashed across his face. Confusion, realization, and a dawning, sickening guilt. He remembered. He remembered that he had missed it with me, and he remembered why. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, charged with all the unspoken truths. The food on the table sat between us, growing colder by the second, a perfect metaphor for our marriage. I finished packing my suitcase with efficient, emotionless movements. The click of the latches was a final, decisive sound. During my business trip, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar frequency. Ethan, who usually sent a perfunctory "you there" text, was now a model of attentiveness. "How's the trip? Is the hotel comfortable? When is your return flight? Let me know the exact time, I'll pick you up." His desperation was palpable, a thin veneer over his panic. I gave him my flight details. On the day of my return, as I walked out of the arrivals gate, I saw his car, a sleek black Mercedes, pulled up by the curb. My heart didn't flutter. My steps didn't quicken. I felt nothing. Seeing me, he got out and hurried over, his smile a little too wide. Isabella. Here, let me get that. He took my suitcase, his hand brushing against mine. I didn't flinch. But as we approached the passenger side, my steps faltered. There, lounging in the front seat with her feet propped up on the dashboard, was Chloe. She saw me and offered a sweet, saccharine smile. Isabella. Hey, I'm just hitching a ride. I'll let you have the front seat in a bit, I promise. She grinned, a picture of cheeky innocence, making no move to actually get out. Ethan, having stowed my luggage, saw me standing rigidly and had the decency to look uncomfortable. She was nearby and her car broke down. You know how impossible it is to get a cab from her neighborhood. She gets car sick, so I just let her sit up front for this part of the journey. It was the same old script. Before I could even form a response, Chloe leaned her head out of the window. Thank goodness Ethan was around today. I'd have been stranded. Isabella, if you don't believe me, the chat logs are in the group. That group. The sacred digital space of his childhood friends, from which I was conspicuously absent. Of course, if Ethan had left me stranded, she continued, playfully punching his arm before pulling back and blinking at me with feigned nervousness, I would have tattled to our godparents. Oh sis, I'm just used to this, no other intentions. Her performance was masterful. She had gone from being blatantly unrestrained to pretending to walk on eggshells around me, all while ensuring her presence was a constant needling reminder of my outsider status. I could feel the subtle challenge in her eyes, the dare to make a scene. In the past, this would have ignited a fire in me. But now, I was just tired. So tired. When Ethan finally, hesitantly, asked Chloe to get out, I simply waved a hand. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. I have a friend who's also heading our way. I'll sit in the back with him. Ethan's head snapped toward me. A friend? What friend? Before he could react, a voice called my name. Isabella. I turned. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Walking toward us was a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, dressed in a stylish, flamboyant jacket that should have looked ridiculous but somehow suited him perfectly. This was Adrian. As soon as he stopped, he launched into a good-natured complaint. Bella, you left me behind. I turned around to get my suitcase and you were gone. He then pitifully clung to my arm, whining, I don't know anyone here. You have to take care of me. The scene left Ethan and Chloe utterly stunned. After a moment, Ethan reacted, his face hardening as he grabbed my arm. Is this the friend you mentioned? His voice was low, dripping with displeasure. He stared at Adrian, his brows furrowed so tightly they formed a deep crease. Yes, I'm Isabella's good friend Adrian, Adrian said cheerfully, shaking Ethan's stiff hand with an effortless grace. He then proceeded to put his luggage in the trunk and plopped into the back seat, excitedly waving at me. Bella, hop in. I moved to get in, but Ethan stopped me, pulling me close. His voice was a low, furious whisper in my ear. Isabella, it's not appropriate for men and women to sit together like that, is it? I could almost hear his teeth grinding. I looked at him, genuinely puzzled. We're just friends. Then I let my gaze flicker meaningfully toward Chloe, who was still comfortably ensconced in my front seat. For a moment, Ethan was completely speechless. The drive home was a study in contrast. Adrian chatted with me animatedly the entire way, his stories light and funny. The front seat, however, was unnervingly quiet. It wasn't that Chloe wasn't trying. She, with her famously lively personality, attempted to start several conversations, diving into their shared childhood memories and neighborhood gossip, topics from which I was perpetually excluded. But today, no matter how she tried, Ethan remained indifferent. He gave monosyllabic answers, his gaze constantly flicking to the rearview mirror, where he could see Adrian leaning toward me, laughing. A drive that usually felt like a 30-minute exile was over in 15 minutes. After we dropped off Chloe and Adrian, Ethan opened the front passenger door for me. Sit in the front, he commanded, his voice tight. I looked at him, baffled. I'm fine in the back. Isabel, I'm tired. Let's just go home. I closed my eyes, feigning rest. In the quiet of the car, the sound of him shutting the door was louder and heavier than any slam could have been. It was the sound of his control slipping, and he knew it. Ethan entered the house with a storm cloud hanging over him. I had just finished changing my shoes when I saw him in the living room, a cigarette already lit between his fingers. He rarely smoked indoors. The scarlet glow illuminated the sharp angles of his face, casting deep shadows that mirrored the darkness within him. "What's your relationship with that guy?" he demanded, taking a deep drag before stubbing the cigarette out with unnecessary force. He looked up at me, his eyes blazing. I met his gaze, my tone unwavering. "A friend." "A friend," he scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. "A man over 6 feet tall is your friend? Isabella, you went on this business trip with him, didn't you? Several days in a row spending time with that man." His anger was building, a volatile pressure cooker. He kicked my suitcase, which was still by the door, the violence of the gesture shocking in the quiet room. A flicker of my old anger ignited. I strode over, opened the suitcase and looked him dead in the eye. "Business partners are either male or female. He has a good personality and we get along. What's wrong with being friends?" "Of course there's a problem. He's a man. How can a man be a friend like that?" he roared. "Why?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "You can have a female brother, but I can't have a male friend?" My words hung in the air, a perfect, unassailable mirror. I watched as shock, frustration, and sheer, impotent rage warred on his face. He had never been confronted with his own hypocrisy so bluntly. Finally, he almost spat the words through gritted teeth. "Chloe is different. We grew up together. If anything were to happen, it would have." "Adrian and I are different too," I interrupted, my tone firm and final. "Can't we trust each other?" Ethan was at a complete loss. He just stood there, deflated, the wind knocked out of his sails. For the next several days, we moved around each other in a cold, silent war. A few uneventful days passed, the quiet before the inevitable storm. Then his parents invited us over for dinner. At the dinner table, the tension between us was a palpable, unwelcome guest. His parents noticed. "Ethan," his mother said gently, "Isabella moved far away from home to be with you. You must treat her well." His parents were good people. They had always been kind to me. Listening to them, Ethan's expression softened. He reached under the table and took my hand. "Isabella, he began, his voice thick with a genuine, if belated, remorse. But before he could finish, an arm was thrown around his neck from behind. "Ethan, you're finally back. Let's hang out." It was Chloe. Once again she was there, shamelessly hanging on to him, her timing impeccable. But this time Ethan didn't smile back. Instead, he carefully removed her hand, his eyes fixed nervously on me. Chloe noticed, clicked her tongue, and began her exaggerated performance. "Oh, it's Isabella," she said, taking a deliberate theatrical step back, landing right in the midst of the group of friends who had followed her in. "Ethan, you didn't even show up in the group chat. If Chloe hadn't seen you, we would have missed you." "Yeah, everyone's here. Let's hang out," the others started jeering. Ethan's face clearly showed he was tempted. This was his tribe, his comfort zone. But unlike before, he didn't immediately agree. He looked at me, silently asking for permission. Everyone noticed. The air grew tense. They were all waiting for my answer, hoping I wouldn't come, yet hoping I'd release him. As they wished, I withdrew my hand from his. My voice was calm and gentle, a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere. "Then I'll take a taxi home." No one spoke. The silence was awkward, heavy with judgment. After a long moment, Ethan hesitated, his expression a mix of relief and guilt. "I'll come back early," he promised. I just smiled, a hollow, brittle thing, and walked straight out of the courtyard. As I turned the corner, I heard someone from the group blurt out, "Ethan, did Isabella have a change of heart? Not jealous of Chloe anymore? Letting you hang out with us?" Their laughter followed me, but it felt distant, irrelevant. I had passed a point of no return. At 11 o'clock that night, Ethan hadn't returned. I didn't ask. I didn't care. As I had made plans with Adrian. Along with a few other colleagues, we went to the most bustling bar in town. The pounding music was a physical sensation, a welcome numbness that drowned out the quiet despair of my empty apartment. Our group found a spacious booth and quickly settled into the reckless abandon of the night. After a few rounds of drinks, someone next to me got excited and pointed. "Whoa, that looks wild over there." We all turned to look, and I saw them. At a nearby table was Ethan's entire childhood crew. 7 guys and 1 girl, Chloe, with the table piled high with empty bottles. Ethan was in the center seat. Even from this distance I could see he was looking down at his phone, his posture tense. Then I saw Chloe snatch the phone from his hand. She then, in a move that seemed to happen in slow motion, straddled him, wrapping her arms around his neck and waving a bottle of alcohol. Everyone around them seemed used to it, even standing up to cheer. "Looks like they're playing King's game," someone from my group commented, their voice laced with voyeuristic excitement. "Feeding each other drinks, mouth to mouth. That girl is wild. She was just asked to take off her bra and she did it without a word, hung it around the neck of the guy next to her. That's something else. I've seen guys ride girls but never 7 guys and 1 girl. It's like a reverse harem," another laughed. Everyone around me was laughing but I wasn't. Because I saw Ethan put down his phone and amid everyone's cheers, allow Chloe to bend down, the alcohol in her mouth, ready to transfer it to his. It was utterly viscerally disgusting. Chloe didn't get to feed him. As I walked over. And I slapped her. The sound cracked through the music, silencing their table instantly. The scene became very ugly. Ethan's friends rushed to smooth things over, a chorus of, "It's just a joke," and "It's just a game." Chloe looked pitiful, her hand on her reddening cheek, tears welling in her eyes. But I, with a blank expression, reached over, pulled her bra from the neck of the man beside her and threw it in her face. "If you like playing," I said, my voice cold and clear, "wait until Ethan and I divorce. Then you can play all you want." I turned and walked away. I was serious, because I was truly bone-deep tired. But Ethan didn't agree. He chased me back home, his words tumbling out in a frantic, desperate stream. "Isabella, honey, we were really just playing a game. Chloe always messes around with us. We don't even think of her as a woman. Honey, you just lost your temper too. At worst, I promise I won't mess around with them again." His attempts to appease me only fueled his own impatience. Finally, he grabbed his hair and yelled, "Isabella, I didn't even say anything about you coming to the bar with a group of guys." By this point, I had already pulled out my luggage and was packing anew. "Move," I said, looking coldly at his arm blocking the doorway. "Do you have to be so serious about this?" he pleaded, his voice breaking. "Ethan," I asked, my voice dangerously quiet, "can you accept me sitting on Adrian's lap like that?" He froze, his face a mask of horror. I sneered, taking a step closer. "You can't. You saw us sitting together in the back seat during a business trip and were mad at me for days. So why do you expect me to turn a blind eye?" "That's different," he blurted out. "I'm a man, you're a woman. When I go out, no one takes advantage of me." Hearing his words, something in me finally completely shattered. I even felt like I was meeting this person for the first time. My body trembled with a fresh, incandescent rage. "So you all knew," I said, my voice trembling with disbelief. "You knew Chloe's behavior was wrong. It was wanton. It was disgusting. But just because she's a woman you enjoy it? You take pride in taking advantage of her?" Ethan was speechless. His face turned a sickly pale and he averted his gaze. I had hit the mark. "Adrian," I said, my voice now steady and cold. "I brought him to provoke you on purpose." Ethan's eyes lit up with a flicker of surprise, of hope. He thought this was all a game, a tactic. Then I continued, shattering that hope. "Because I initially thought you just didn't understand boundaries. I wanted you to learn from experience. I was wrong. You weren't unaware. You just enjoyed it." I pushed him hard. Ethan, a man over 6 feet tall, fell to the ground, unprepared for the force of my contempt. I looked down at him, my husband, crumpled on the floor of the home we shared. "Ethan," I said, my voice devoid of all warmth, "let's get a divorce. Or I'll despise you even more." The words hung in the air, final and absolute. The unraveling was complete. Ethan refused to agree to the divorce. He dug in his heels, employing a strategy of stubborn denial, as if by refusing to sign the papers, he could force reality back into a shape he recognized. He even brought in my parents, leveraging the good image he had so carefully cultivated with them over the years. He was highly educated, handsome, from a respectable family and a successful entrepreneur. When he sat in my parents' living room, his contrition seemed genuine. "I made a mistake," he told them, his voice heavy. "A stupid, childish mistake. But I love Isabella. I can't lose her." My parents, who valued stability and hated conflict, were swayed. They saw his pleading, his promises, and the comfortable life he provided. They began to gently pressure me. "Isabella, everyone makes mistakes," my mother whispered, using my childhood name. "The Han family is being sincere this time. And Ethan, he really knows he was wrong." But then the tide turned in a way none of us could have anticipated. Ethan became famous. Someone had filmed the bar incident and uploaded it online. Suddenly, the whole internet knew about Chloe sitting on a married man's lap, attempting to feed him alcohol mouth to mouth and getting slapped by the man's wife. The court of public opinion delivered a swift and brutal verdict. Disgusting. She knew he had a wife and still went for it. Doesn't matter if he has a wife, she'd go for anyone. Did you see her bra hanging around another guy's neck? Wow, public property. The guy is gross too. So many people, and he's not afraid of getting diseases. At first, Chloe argued with the netizens, claiming they were heartless and dirty-minded, that her relationship with Ethan was pure childhood friendship. But the internet is a relentless beast. They dug up her social media history, her various accounts. The more they dug, the more they found. Pictures of her wearing Ethan's clothes. Posts about sleeping in their beds. Photos of them sharing the same cup, the same ice cream, their hands intertwined. The most damning was a boastful entry about sneaking into a private male bathhouse, wrapped in a towel to soak with her brothers. She had documented it all, her words filled with a perverse pride. Chloe became infamous. Ethan became infamous. Their entire neighborhood group became infamous. Marketing accounts dubbed them Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and netizens declared it the worst defamation of Snow White in history. Watching it all unfold, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Chloe had been a cancer in my marriage and I had tried to cut her out, but Ethan had refused. Now the cancer had metastasized and it was consuming them all. The public outcry was eventually suppressed. Ethan's friends were all wealthy, influential scions, and they used their resources to wipe the negative comments clean from the internet. Chloe's accounts were scrubbed entirely. But the damage to their reputations and to their own group dynamic was done. A few days later, Ethan's parents came to see me. Their faces were etched with a new, profound worry. They begged me to visit Ethan at the hospital. He drank himself sick, his mother cried, clutching my hand. He was vomiting blood. By the time we found him, he was in a deep coma. They barely saved him after a night of emergency care. "Isabella, on the hospital bed he keeps murmuring your name. I know he was wrong, but for the sake of your marriage, please go see him." I went to the hospital. The clinical smell of antiseptic filled my nostrils. Ethan lay in the bed, dwarfed by the white sheets. He had lost a staggering amount of weight. His hospital gown hung loosely on his frame, and his face was pale, almost translucent. Only when he saw me did a flicker of life return to his desolate eyes. I walked over, stopping his weak struggle to sit up. "When will you be discharged?" I asked, my voice neutral. His eyes brightened, mistaking my presence for forgiveness. "Next week," he rasped. "Isabella, does this mean you're willing to forgive me? I promise if you give me another chance I'll never make the same mistake again. I'll keep my distance from Chloe." "When you're discharged," I said, my words cleaving through his hope like a guillotine, "we'll file for divorce." I watched his face contort in pain. Sweat beaded on his forehead, sliding down his temples. His voice was rough, like it was filled with sand. "Isabella, I didn't cheat. You know that. It was all just fooling around. I promise I'll keep my distance from them if you don't like it. Isabella, I beg you, don't leave me." Seeing I was unmoved, he did the unthinkable. He threw back the covers and, in a tangle of 4 lines, fell off the bed, kneeling in front of me. The 4 stand clattered to the floor, the needle twisting and tearing his hand, blood splattering onto the pristine white tiles. It was a pitiful and tragic sight. When had Ethan, proud, handsome Ethan, ever been reduced to this? I should have been moved. But I wasn't. I just looked down at him with no intention of helping him up. "No," I said, shaking my head. My coldness seemed to physically wound him. He looked up, his eyes filled with a despair I couldn't comprehend. "It was Chloe who came on to us. I didn't reject her, but I never did anything to betray you. Why can't you let it go?" he shouted, the exertion pulling at his wound, the red stain on his abdomen spreading. The commotion brought in both our parents. The scene turned chaotic. "Isabella, Ethan made a mistake, but the main culprit is Chloe," my father-in-law implored. Ethan just treated her as a sister. He was also deceived. There's a saying, my mother-in-law added, her voice trembling. It takes 100 years to form a boat ride together, 1,000 years to sleep together as a couple. We've watched you and Ethan come this far. Does it really have to end like this? I promise as long as you and Ethan don't divorce from now on, the house, the car, the company, all the savings will be in your name. If there's a next time, Ethan will leave with nothing. My father-in-law had absolute authority in the family. This was an unprecedented concession. My parents were visibly swayed. They looked at me, their expressions hesitant. Isabella, my mother whispered, pulling me aside. The Hahn family is sincere this time. And Ethan, he really knows he was wrong. My father wanted to argue, but my mother glared at him. Oscar, I know what you want to say. We can support our daughter, but Isabella's child also can't be without a father. Yes. I was pregnant. 1 month along. I had planned to quietly get an abortion, but my parents had found the paperwork. Elders value life far more than expected. They looked at Ethan, their expressions softening, clearly wanting to give him and this unborn child another chance. In the end, surrounded by the pleading of 4 parents, with the weight of a new life growing inside me, I agreed to a compromise. Yes. I will give you 1 more chance, Ethan, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. 1 month. No contact with Chloe whatsoever. No calls, no texts, no seeing her. If you can do it, I will stop considering divorce. Both sets of parents were witnesses. Ethan, from his pathetic position on the floor, looked up, his face a mess of tears and blood. He was overjoyed, agreeing immediately. It seemed like such a simple, achievable task for him. Both families breathed a collective sigh of relief. They saw it as a path to reconciliation. But only I knew. For him this was a losing bet. I had not chosen to stay, I had chosen the manner of our end. I had given him an illusion of choice, while I alone knew what the outcome would be. The month that followed was a strange pantomime of domesticity. Ethan was a man transformed, or so it seemed. He blocked Chloe on every platform. He left the neighborhood group chat. He showed me daily screenshots of his phone, a digital leash to prove his fidelity. He was attentive, present, and desperately eager to please. He was trying to win back the game he thought we were still playing. Adrian was surprised when I told him. Isabella, you're not thinking of getting back with your ex, are you? He asked, his usual flamboyance replaced with genuine concern. Though he seemed carefree, he always maintained a respectful distance. He knew the whole story and had been my staunchest ally. Fight fire with fire, he'd advised during our business trip. Make him experience what it's like. The effect had been clear, but now I saw the deeper truth. The problem wasn't just Chloe, I told him. It was Ethan. He enjoyed it. Adrian noticed my determination and sighed. Divorce is inevitable. Thinking I had relented, both families assumed the crisis was over. However, after seeing my parents off at the airport, I went to the clinic and scheduled the abortion. I chose the date deliberately. It was Chloe's birthday. How did I know? Because Chloe, as the only girl in their group, always had a mandatory full attendance celebration. Rain or shine. It was a sacred tradition, born from a childhood debt I was about to learn. I didn't choose that day out of spite. I chose it because I didn't want Ethan to be there. I didn't want his pleas, his drama, his presence to influence my decision. This was about me, my body, and my future. Adrian took me there. On the way he was a wreck. I'm serious, he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. Keeping the child isn't impossible. I could help raise it. I'm never getting married anyway. Adrian had lost his first love tragically young and had worn a mask of carefree bachelorhood ever since. Isabella, won't you reconsider? I'll cover half the costs of raising the child, he pleaded, his eyes glistening. But I remained calm. I am me first, then a mother to my child. Adrian was speechless, looking at me with a complex expression before finally nodding. As a friend, I respect all your decisions. As a man, I understand your determination to leave Ethan. I forced a smile. Without looking, I knew my expression was bleak. Even though my decision was firm, I still teared up as I was wheeled away. My flat belly didn't make me feel like a mother, but I admitted to myself that it was for this potential child that I hadn't filed for divorce immediately, that I had offered Ethan one last, impossible chance to empathize. Unfortunately, he didn't seize it. After the anesthesia took effect, I was unaware of everything. So I didn't know I was about to go through a life and death ordeal. The patient is bleeding heavily and it won't stop. Where are the patient's family members? We need an immediate signature. When the doctor rushed out of the operating room, Adrian was stunned. They shoved the documents into his hands. But he couldn't prove any familial relationship with me. Can we leave it blank for now? Her parents aren't local and her husband is busy. Are you kidding? Hospital regulations. Call her husband immediately. The patient's condition is critical. The doctor's face was a mask of urgency. Adrian snapped out of his daze and frantically called Ethan. Once, twice, 3 times, 13 times, 33 times, 53 times. No answer. On the 53rd call, the phone was directly hung up. Adrian went from worried to panicked to completely unhinged. Answer the phone, Ethan, you damn bastard. Your wife is dying and you have the nerve to be celebrating another woman's birthday. He screamed hysterically in the hospital corridor. Onlookers, medical staff, and patients alike paused, moved by the scene. They joined in, cursing the unseen scumbag trying to help find a solution. Finally, someone suggested, if you can't find him, try finding someone who can. Adrian had an epiphany. He took my phone and dialed another number. He called my father-in-law. Ethan arrived 15 minutes later. His parents were right behind him. When he arrived, he was a mess, covered in cake and cream, his tie hanging loose, his collar wide open, his hair soaking wet. These were details I would later hear from Adrian. The patient's uterine wall is naturally thin, which caused the heavy bleeding, the doctor told me when I finally woke, weak and disoriented. But fortunately, the emergency treatment was timely, and we managed to save your uterus. Adrian marveled at my luck. I remained indifferent. Is Ethan still kneeling outside? I asked, my voice a dry whisper. This time, Ethan was kneeling outside the hospital room and no one pleaded for him. My in-laws knew they were in the wrong. After the surgery, my mother-in-law comforted me, her face lined with shame and sorrow. Before leaving, she held my hand. Isabella, you've suffered so much these years after marrying into our family. My son is hopeless, she said, her voice breaking. If you want a divorce, we won't try to stop you. Follow your own heart. I met Adrian's complex gaze. Help me out, I said, my voice weak but steady. He wanted to persuade me to rest, but he couldn't. So he helped me into a wheelchair and pushed me towards the door. In the hospital corridor, Ethan was kneeling upright, still in his wrinkled, cream-stained suit. A fresh bruise bloomed on his cheekbone. Adrian had hit him. In front of everyone, Ethan hadn't fought back. And now, with people coming and going, Ethan, who always hated being watched, hadn't moved an inch. Seeing me, his face contorted in pain and sorrow. But before he could speak, I threw a document at him. It was the printed screenshot of my call log to him, 53 unanswered calls. You lost, I said. The 3 concise words made his face change drastically. The noisy corridor, the murmurs of onlookers, nothing could drown out his ragged breathing. Without looking at the paper, he stared at me, his eyes desperate. Smart as he was, he quickly pieced it together. You chose today on purpose, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Just to make me choose. To make me regret. The more he spoke, the more pained he looked. Finally, he struck his temple hard. I rolled my eyes, a gesture of utter contempt. You overthink. No matter what choice you made, I didn't want this child. My voice was weak, but my words hit their mark. I knew you couldn't do it. Even though the task was simple. Just 1 month. But such a simple thing, Ethan couldn't do it. Chloe saved our lives in elementary school, he burst out as if this justified everything. We were stupid, we hid in a shipping container to sleep. We woke up thousands of meters in the air. She found us, she saved us. So we promised her we'd always gather for her birthday. They had a story, a bond forged in childhood trauma. Their cherished pet was their business. But their loyalty to a childhood promise had cost them a marriage, a child, and any semblance of honor. Their cherished pet was their business. And I was done with the whole company. Ethan agreed to the divorce. The fight had finally gone out of him. The man who knelt in the hospital corridor was a hollowed-out shell of the confident, charismatic man I had married. All the paperwork was completed with a grim efficiency. Soon, the 1-month cooling-off period passed, and we found ourselves walking out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the final divorce certificates in hand. The sun was too bright, the day too ordinary for the monumental shift that had just occurred in my life. His expression was mournful, a portrait of regret. He was still unwilling to let go, clutching at the shreds of what we had been. "Isabella, please," he begged, his voice raw. "Another chance. Let me atone. I love you. I know I don't deserve it, but I love you." His tall frame was hunched over, as if carrying the weight of his own mistakes was physically crushing him. From pleading, he descended into a relentless, desperate clinging, grabbing my arm as I tried to walk away. In the midst of our struggle on the sidewalk, neither of us noticed the sleek red BMW until it was too late. It was speeding, swerving, its engine a menacing growl. It was aiming straight for me. Bang. Everything happened in a horrifying blur of sound and motion. One moment I was trying to pull my arm from Ethan's grasp. The next I was thrown backward by a powerful shove, landing hard on the pavement. The world tilted, sounds muffled, and I saw Ethan being hit by the car, his body thrown into the air like a rag doll in a slow-motion nightmare. The last thing he said to me before impact was a gasped, "I'm sorry." In that moment my heart stopped. Accompanied by the heavy, sickening thud of his body hitting the asphalt, I snapped back to a terrifying reality. I scrambled over, my mind screaming. And at that moment the passenger door of the BMW flew open. Chloe burst out, her face a twisted mask of rage. When she saw it was Ethan who had been hit, she let out a primal scream. She saw me, unhurt, and her eyes locked onto mine with pure, undiluted hatred. "Why don't you die?" she shrieked, and then she was running toward me, a glint of metal in her hand. A knife. But she was quickly subdued by patrolling police officers who materialized from the chaos. They pinned her to the hood of the car, wrenching the knife from her hand. "Isabella, why don't you die? If it weren't for you, they wouldn't have all distanced themselves from me," she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "It's all because of you. You bitch. I'll kill you." Chloe had gone completely mad. Because on the day of my surgery, my in-laws had found Ethan and the neighborhood friends at Chloe's birthday party. They were furious. In a meeting of the families, a decision was made to blacklist the Jiang family to quell the scandal. To protect their own interests, the Jiang family decided to sacrifice Chloe, making plans to send her abroad and forbidding her from ever returning. The young masters who had once treated her like their mascot immediately distanced themselves when their own reputations and inheritances were on the line. For Chloe, the loss of her social standing, her brothers, and her entire identity was her darkest hour. And she believed with every fiber of her being that I was the cause of it all. If I were dead, she thought everything could go back to the way it was. Listening to her screams as the paramedics worked frantically on Ethan's broken body, I only felt a profound, bone-deep absurdity. This was the woman for whom Ethan had thrown away his marriage. This was the friendship he had valued above all else. It had all culminated in this. Blood on the asphalt, screams in the air, and the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. Ethan survived. But the cost was catastrophic. The impact had severely damaged his spinal cord. He was paralyzed from the waist down. The proud man who commanded boardrooms and charmed rooms would never walk again. Chloe wasn't sentenced to death, but her fate was sealed. Charged with intentional injury and attempted murder, she was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. I heard through the grim grapevine that in prison for reasons unknown, her face was slashed multiple times, disfiguring her. The beauty she had wielded as a weapon was taken from her, a poetic, if brutal, justice. In the wake of the accident, I was besieged by voices. His parents, aged a decade in a matter of weeks, begged me. "Isabella, please don't abandon him now. Not after what he did for you. For the sake of your past marriage, please." His friends, a quieter, more chastened group, hoped I would stay. "He saved your life," they said, as if that one heroic act could erase years of emotional neglect and betrayal. My parents, however, were firm. "Come home, Isabella," my mother urged, her voice tight with worry. "Don't tie yourself to a lifetime of trouble. You've been through enough." In the end, I went to see him one last time. The hospital room had become his new, permanent address. The once vibrant man now lay in a bed that seemed to swallow him whole. He didn't speak when I entered. But when he looked at me, his eyes were pools of a regret so deep it seemed bottomless. Thanked him. It was the least I could do and the most I could offer. "You saved my life, Ethan. I will never forget that." I know I have no right to ask you to stay, he choked out, his voice hoarse and filled with a sorrow that seemed to thicken the air. Everything now is my own doing. My retribution. The doctors haven't given up on you, I said, my voice even. If you cooperate with the treatment, you still have a chance to walk again. Ethan was visibly excited by this, a flicker of the old hope igniting in his eyes. He looked at me nervously, cautiously. So, you're willing to? I'm going back home, I said, gently but firmly shattering that last fragile hope. You know I'm an only child. If it weren't for you, I would have returned home after graduation to start my career. My tone was calm, steady, final. In that instant, I saw his face darken, the light in his eyes extinguished like a snuffed candle. He looked like a sunflower withering in the shade. His eyes reddened, and his smile was a bitter, self-mocking twist of his lips. I knew it, he whispered. A cripple like me is meant to rot in the mud for the rest of my life. Ethan, I interrupted, my gaze steady and unforgiving. We each have our own lives. You can no longer influence mine, and I shouldn't influence yours. Maybe my gaze was too piercing, too final. It struck his heart with the force of a physical blow. The room fell into a deep, resonant silence. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow on me, a woman stepping out of the shadows and into her own light. For him, it illuminated the stark, empty confines of the prison he had built for himself. I turned and walked away, leaving him in that silent room. I didn't look back. I went back home. I returned to my quiet hometown, to the familiar streets and the comforting presence of my parents. I continued to hear bits and pieces about Ethan, the echoes of a life I had left behind. It took him 2 years to learn to walk again with the aid of braces and an immense effort of will. But his long illness and rehabilitation had stalled his company's progress, and it eventually closed its doors. The brilliant entrepreneur was no more. Another New Year's Eve arrived, blanketing the town in a soft, silent layer of snow. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Adrian. Happy New Year, Bella. I received it while helping my parents make dumplings, my hands dusted with flour. I wiped them on my apron and opened the message to find a selfie of him, sitting alone on a balcony, a single glass of champagne in his hand. He looked thoughtful, a little lonely but at peace. I couldn't help but smile and type back. Spending New Year's alone again? If you can't stand it, come to my parents' place. They'll take you in for a few days. He replied quickly. No, my partner wouldn't be happy. He was referring to his long-deceased first love. He kept her memory alive in his own way, a faithful sentinel to a ghost. I raised an eyebrow and continued. Impressive. Maintaining such gentlemanly conduct all these years. Of course, he replied. Friends also need boundaries. I laughed, a genuine light sound that felt good. Looking up from my phone, I gazed out the window at the falling snow. The world was quiet and clean, the landscape transformed. The scenery was beautiful not because it was perfect but because it was mine. It was a new horizon, untainted by the ghosts of the past, and for the first time in a very long time I was looking forward to the journey. The end.